Welcome back to our Succession podcast. This week we're talking about the third episode of season 3, The Disruption. There was a lot to do with the public perception of the Roys in this episode and how they react to it, and a lot of them trying to communicate with each other through the press, which is, I think, kind of a fun dynamic. So the episode began with an interview with Kendall and then his siblings kind of responding to it and mocking it amongst themselves, which was a pretty fun, I think, opening beat.
Yes, I feel like this is something fans have been wanting for a while, is more of a sense of the public perception of the Roys and kind of the media reaction to them. So it was really fun to see. I loved, I'm really happy right now in my headspace, and Roman just making that a thing, asking everyone he knows, how's your headspace?
And Kendall, once again, talking about his kids and how much he loves his kids, who we still haven't seen. And I know they're going to be in this season at some point because there was a shot of them in the trailer. He is not beating the absentee father allegations, that's for sure.
No, not at all.
Logan is not really giving over any power to Jerry. Still having meetings with other people.
Still having meetings specifically with Tom and Frank, the only white men in his circle. And Jerry's off in another room, like several rooms away.
I always love the way that this show deals with like corporate bullshit slogans. So "we get it" was great. Like the little mock-ups that they had of a full page ad. I just got a kick out of that. And on this week's official Succession podcast, Lucy Preble, who's one of the writers, producers of the show, I believe, she mentioned that Roman and Shiv's reactions in that scene were basically just things that the writers said in the room, sort of in reaction to that slogan. So I thought that was kind of fun to see kind of how those scenes, come about.
Something I really loved about the podcast this week was she mentioned how "we get it" was like they came up with a slogan, not they definitely want to do a slogan, so they started brainstorming. She mentioned as well that they try to always ground the things in the show in things that they have seen happen in real life, and I think it definitely shows.
So the Kendall posse is playing good tweet, bad tweet in a limousine, which was a fun scene. These tweets were so perfectly written. I thought they just captured like Twitter culture and lingo to a T. Like, allies don't always come in the forms we want them to, but what Kendall did was important and brave. Just like so perfectly captured sort of the different brands, and you could totally see the way that this could kind of have these cycles of Twitter discourse where maybe at first people are like, oh, this Kendall guy seems great, and then maybe they learn more about who he actually is, dig up these old sketchy pictures of him flashing gang signs, and they're like, no, and then there's like the counter backlash. So I thought sort of having a quick little glimpse into that was really fun.
Oh yeah.
And seemed very realistic too.
Oh yeah, I feel like a lot of shows don't really get social media and it can come off as really cringy, but they totally nailed it. And especially I was sad we never got to see the Kendall memes mentioned in the premiere, so I'm glad we got this.
And the fact that like people are thirst tweeting about Kendall, I feel very validated. Loved that. And then the one tweet about his mental health issues and addictions, just that kind of earnest thing that Twitter does sometimes where it's just like, we shouldn't joke about this. This is just sad. I thought was like both really funny and kind of true, as like you could see that being a viral tweet and also like that being the one that hit way too close to home.
So you could see his face falling as it was being read out, and the like hesitant boo like really broke my heart. And I think it pointed very well to what ended up happening later in the episode.
Let's do burn of the week.
That's not a good retort. Don't fucking laugh at that.
Savannah, what was your favorite burn?
My burn of the week was from the last scene. He's bootleg Ross with a daddy complex.
Yeah, that was a good one. I would have retweeted that.
Oh yeah, it's something I feel I could see on my timeline. And I just really respected the level of this insult. Both, I can see the physical resemblance between Kendall and Ross, and also, at this point in our culture, I feel comfortable saying no one likes Ross. He's a guy who's like, I'm a nice guy, but he's not. He's total shithead.
Yes.
Say that Kendall is the worst version of that is just such a high-level insult to me.
My burn of the week, well, I might throw out two because I really did love the other tweet, the one that was a bit more sad, but he clearly has mental health issues and crazy guilt coupled with addiction. That's all this is, and it's sad. Was just so like succinct, and I thought sort of mirrored Shiv's letter at the end. This is just sad, and we just feel bad for him, which I think is the worst thing that Kendall could hear.
Oh, yeah.
But I also wanted to shout out Connor's response to Shiv's letter at the end when he says, this is kind of a greeting card from hell, and calls it a Times New Roman firing squad.
Yes.
Was just such a great turn of phrase, and he was like ready to go with that.
Oh yeah, Connor was on fire in that scene.
So one of the first major events and scenes we get is the gala, which is some kind of event for journalists that we don't see a lot of the actual event, but we see the important parts, which are our faves kind of schmoozing at the beginning of it. So first, Nate makes a surprise appearance. Kind of forgot about him. Kind of forgot, too, that he was supposed to be friends with Kendall. So I thought their little exchange was kind of funny and kind of awkward. Like, oh, hey, man, how's it going?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see Nate again. And definitely not him and Kendall. I feel like if they were really still friends at this point, that would have come up in DC instead of them sending, Shiv, the ex-lover, to talk Nate down.
And then Shiv and Kendall have a little conversation that I thought was really, really interesting. I loved the way he tried to apologize and kind of apologized. He said, I think I'm right. I am right. But I maybe threw some ugly rocks and I'm trying to be more thoughtful. Which to me felt very similar to what he said to his dad in the bear hug letter scene at the end of the first season when he said, I'm not sorry for what I'm doing, which is correct, but I am sorry for how it might make you feel. I just love that he has to be like, I'm right, and like what I'm doing is right, but like I maybe hurt your feelings a little bit, so I'm sorry. I think that totally shows his kind of one-track mind of like, I have to do this thing, even if it hurts the people around me, it's still justified.
Oh yeah, I think it shows his insecurities that he has to talk about how right he is. Kendall's obviously been through a lot of therapy through his rehab and everything, and I think the language he just shows how he's just completely misapplying everything he's learned about like using I feel language.
I feel I am right. I feel that I didn't do anything wrong, but I feel like you might feel like I did. So I guess I feel maybe I'm sorry.
It's really important in therapy that we focus on how we feel. I feel like he does ultimately win this interaction with Shiv. Shiv is talking about change while letting herself be used as a figurehead for Waystar's Bad Apples, the whole campaign. She is really not, it seems, in a different position from Jerry at this point. She's just a woman they're using to hold up and say, see, we don't hate women.
The big line from this scene was when Kendall says, it's you now, which means, she's the puppet, she's like the figurehead, she's the one that's being used by Logan and the one that he's kind of pouring all that like attention into, which Kendall knows is not a good thing. Sarah Snook talked about that line a little bit and how Shiv might not totally be aware enough to like understand all of what he meant, that she probably thinks like she can handle it and that it's going to be different when it's her because she's smart and savvy and she can manipulate her dad right back. She hasn't been totally broken down yet to maybe the point where she realizes that like she can't stay on top of this situation.
Oh yeah, that was her same attitude last season. And it was like, well, Logan told Kendall he would be it, ended up, fucking him over, but it'll be different with me.
It'll be different with me because I'm gonna like sort of hedge my bets and keep my options open, and then it totally backfired and she got fucked over. But now it will be different because now it's definitely not going to be Kendall. So after the gala, Shiv and Logan have a conversation and he's pretty upset that she didn't agree to do the interview and kind of underscores that, yes, she's important because she's his daughter. She's the only woman that's gonna be on his side in that like personal way right now. Shiv is, probably being a little smart by not wanting to put herself on record being like, I love my dad so much, he's great. And Logan understands that and he tries to tell her like there's nothing that will make you ashamed of me if you do this. And then I think trying to figure out how real that promise is.
And the way she was definitely like arguing back and saying, well, Dad, that doesn't really make sense. You are clearly complicit here, but she's still asking him instead of someone who could actually give her an honest answer on this. It just felt very performative to me.
I think one of the things that stood out to me in this scene, and you can see this a lot when Logan argues, I think it was similar to when he like talked with Rhea at the end of season 2, that he just always will move like the goalposts. So he started out being like, oh, just some bad apples, and then he was like, well, maybe there was a culture of bad policies, to then saying, well, I didn't know anything. Yeah, this was happening, but I didn't know anything, to being like, yes, I fought, but it was for the kids. So he totally ceded a lot of ground in that sense. It was interesting to see how far he kind of would allow that to go, to pretty much admitting that he did know things, but saying that, you know, I had to do it for the kids. Everything I've done in my life is for my children.
It was very manipulative, like, I think made it hard for her to keep, like, a hand on the conversation, which I think you're right, was very largely her being like, okay, tell me you're not going to get caught, and just enough that I can still be comfortable, you know, giving you all my love and support.
She doesn't have a moral issue with that much of it. I mean, she personally intimidated a witness last season, which was also such a funny moment in here when she was like, I know that there was targeted witness intimidation.
Because I did it.
Oh yeah, Shiv? Oh yeah? Now how do you know that, Shiv? It was kind of funny. So, you know, she knows her own hands aren't clean, and it was just kind of, I think, trying to have an honest conversation about it. But I think that's something that Logan's is not really willing to give up, even in this kind of closed door setting.
Similar to Kendall, Logan has a very specific and terrible way of apologizing. His line, maybe there were some salty moves, felt very similar to in Hunting, sorry if last night got a little fruity.
I wonder what flavor he'll use next.
And his line, the law is people and people's politics, and I can handle people. I feel it's very telling just for Logan's whole strategy. He's like, you know what, I can manipulate people, I can get them into my cult of personality, and they will do whatever I want. And he has not accepted at this point that that's no longer enough.
That is his strength, and it's brought him this far, but I think part of what Succession shows is like the limit of that type of power. You can't push people around endlessly. Like, there is a point where people are going to refuse to be bullied by you, and we definitely see that in this episode where he kind of overplays his hand because he knows how to handle people, but maybe not as well as he thinks. Let's do Let Them Eat Cake.
Let us eat cake.
My Let Them Eat Cake moment of the week was, well, I guess like everything about the watch, about Greg's watch, but specifically I thought that Kendall's reaction to when Greg balked at buying a $40,000 watch was to say, I'm not your fucking sugar daddy, cheapskate. To call him a cheapskate for not buying a $40,000 watch was so funny. Also, like, later when Greg's like, oh, the watch doesn't even work, and, oh, it's okay, like, I'm just a humble custodian, and watches like this will sometimes have to spend 6 months in Switzerland. I was like, what? What are you talking about? You have to, like, ship it off to Switzerland for 6 months, like, every year? That's, like, half the time you don't even have your watch, because it's getting, like, tinkered on by little elves in a cave in Switzerland. Like, what are you talking about?
My Let Them Eat Cake moment was also from the whole watch saga. I really liked the line from the guy selling Greg the watch, every janitor in America has one, talking about cell phones. It's so funny, especially talking about smartphones. I think most people I know are on payment plans for smartphones, so to say that, oh, you're basically poor to have a phone, and still not everyone has a cell phone. Just was a very funny line to hear.
I also love that Kendall said that he would hook him up, which Greg thought he would buy him a watch, but apparently he was just like introducing him to his watch guy. Like, is that a favor? Is it like that hard to find someone who will sell you a $40,000 watch?
A question for the wealth consultant on the show, perhaps. And also, how can Greg drop $40K on a watch, but he can't find his own lawyer? Like, I feel like at this point he was just being lazy by not getting his own lawyer.
So in a mirror to the limo scene, Later on, Kendall makes everyone at his party watch a comedian eviscerate him on TV, and it is like one of the most unbearable cringe things I've seen. I mean, this episode honestly was chock full of unbearable cringe things, but I loved it. Absolutely delicious. Just like watching him try to laugh it off and kind of act like he's in on the joke when it's like becomes increasingly clear that he's not in on the joke. It's just so painful.
Imagine just being at a party and this just starts happening. You can see from the reactions of like everyone at the party who doesn't intimately know Kendall that he's not like fooling anyone here. And I think also it kind of showed that as a PR lady, you should maybe not party with your clients, because I don't feel like she did a good job pivoting to crisis mode here at all.
He needs to get acceptance from everyone else in the world now that he's not after his dad's love anymore.
That's how much Logan's love is worth.
It's okay if my daddy doesn't love me. I'll just get everyone in the entire world to love me instead. Let's do number one boy.
You're my boy. You're my number one boy.
My number one boy for this episode was Tom. I really felt for him here. He no longer has Greg. Previously, he could get Greg to go to dinner with him just because. Here, he could not even get Greg to go to dinner with him for legal advice that Greg actually needed. The only way that he has to, like, express any frustration about the situation is by putting Greg in a crappier office. Still, like, a huge, nicely sized office for him, frankly.
You're like, I would take that.
I mean, I don't have an office, I have a cube. He still has an office.
Clean it up. It has a door and everything.
And, like, Shiv put their dog's life in danger, which he had to take care of.
Oh, poor Mondale.
And Tom is in huge legal trouble here when, looking back, Tom, when he found out about cruises, he wanted to come forward. But Jerry intimidated him, and that was his family. That was the woman he loved and family he wanted to marry into. So he didn't do it. And since then, he has just been shit on. And I just want to hug him and also give him a knife to kill these people with.
My number one boy was Kendall.
Happy for you.
Oh my god, he felt so vulnerable throughout this entire episode. You can tell we have similar things. We're like, who made us the most sad? Even at the beginning of this episode when he was still, kind of acting like he had it together, the mask was slipping a lot compared to the first two episodes. There were a lot of moments when you could tell things were beginning to get through to him. And I just felt like his little, like, bloody beating heart was, like, right below the surface. Like, he was a little, like featherless baby bird with, like, translucent skin, and I'm, like, holding him in my hands. And if I, like, flinched, I would accidentally crush him. Like, that's how I felt. I prepared that metaphor, but yes, that's how I felt about Kendall this episode. And that's why he is my number one boy, because I wanted to hold him gently in my hands and not let him get crushed.
I was very tempted to pick Kendall, as he's always my actual number one boy,
Yeah.
but trying to give some other people
Yes.
some hands to be held in.
I respect that. Tom has a little bit of an arc in this episode after not having very much to do in the past two, so it was kind of fun to see him back in the action a little bit. He sort of drunkenly pitches that maybe he should just go to jail, which I think I'm still trying to kind of get a read on it. I feel like it's one of those scenes that will become a little more clear in retrospect when we see how this plays out, because it does feel sincere in the moment with Shiv. Like, I don't think he's playing Shiv. I think he's just being sort of honest. Like, he just had that terrible meeting with the lawyer. He's kind of in a place where he's thinking, I'm gonna go to jail no matter what, and trying to, like, be in denial about it or try and fight it could feel like it would make it just more painful. And for him, maybe to just be like, I'll do it, I'll just go to jail, is sort of like, rip off the Band-Aid, just do it. And he even says, like, oh, I could get out in a year or something. So he's obviously taking it very seriously at this point. And I gotta say, it would be kind of funny if Tom went to jail, because he specifically said in, like, 2 different points in the show already that, like, rich people never go to jail, the authorities can't touch us. So from that angle, even though I love Tom and it would be really sad, it would also be, like, kind of, like, funny in an ironic sense if he ended up going to jail for this.
I think Tom was being sincere in the scene in the sense that he hadn't decided what to do yet. I think maybe he was considering playing Logan in the way that they seem to be setting it up, but I think he was honestly asking, so what does my wife think about the idea of me going to jail? And her reaction was a lot. I don't think they know enough at this point. They don't even know if the papers are going to come out, really. And she was totally wrong that this would help him bake gold with Logan. Logan does not respect this. Logan respected Kendall standing up and saying, fuck you, I'm going to send you to jail instead. Like, this is not a smart move for Tom at all. And it was just very fake, the way she was like, yeah, that's super smart. Oh, but don't do it. Hi, you're so sexy.
No, but it would be, it's kind of genius. But no, Tom, no. What are you talking about, silly goose? But it'd be pretty smart. Yeah, her reaction was, I think, probably made him feel pretty bad. And I think that, like, Logan's reaction kind of going off of him not like respecting it, which I agree. I don't understand why either of them think this would like get him on Logan's good side, because it felt kind of similar as the end of season 2 when Connor like volunteered himself and Logan was like, oh, thanks, Connor. That's very kind. I'll bear it in mind. Like, kind of humoring him, but that wasn't like, oh my gosh, my son Connor loves me so much he offered to go to jail. I don't think that, I mean, he seemed very polite to Tom, but I didn't get the sense that he was like, oh, that Tom, I respect him now.
He was polite to Tom the way he was polite to Roman and thanked him for telling him to pick Jerry if he didn't think he was ready. That was the energy of the scene
where
today.
He's kind of like, oh, these losers.
And Shiv, we know Shiv doesn't want Tom to go to jail. She threw Kendall overboard so Tom would go to jail. I think at this point she's just like, well, it's not happening, so I don't have to put energy into this right now.
Yes, she does seem just very in denial, not really thinking about it as a real possibility. It would be sad, I think, even for Tom to kind of roll over like this. So it does seem like he's, you know, putting his feelers out there. He called another law firm, so he has something cooking. So that's pretty exciting to me. And I have to say, it would be so funny if Tom switched sides now after this episode or in a few more episodes, because Shiv is so personally angry at Kendall right now. Like, she fucking hates Kendall right now. So for Tom to be like, oh, by the way, I'm gonna go work with your brother, would just be, to me, that would be the funniest thing in the world. And I think just like a perfect time for him to do that for like, yeah, dramatic and comedic reasons. I would love it. And, you know, Tom and Kendall had a weird little interaction in the hallway at Waystar, so it feels like there's a little bit of setup like in that direction, which I'm excited about.
It definitely feels like there's setup for either team up or, you know, Kendall could screw him over. I'm hoping for the former because Tom deserves it, and because Tom and Shiv, I think they would continue to, you know, do the married couple thing and sit around the dinner table, which would be just a great source of comedy. Kendall told him another life is possible, brother. He continues to sound like he's trying to get people to join a religion when he's trying to get people to join Team Kendall. And Kendall tells Tom that he likes him, which is not something that I have ever seen in the show.
Yes, he has never really demonstrated like a deep well of affection for Tom. Let's do location.
Venice, St. Bart's, the Maldives. Has she heard of these locations? She must be aware of them.
One of the locations that I want to point out in this episode as being very effective was the town hall setting. I just thought the way that was staged created so much just anxiety and added a lot to the scene to see like all these people up on the balconies watching sort of in the overflow seating, the big screens with Shiv on. I just thought like the way that they put that together, it was cool to see like a big, you know, crowd scene like that.
I'm remembering something you said before about how this season was written pre-COVID, but so far it has felt like a COVID show with the limited people in scenes, yes. And this scene did not feel that way.
And I know other people have kind of speculated about that, of like, were these first 2 episodes always gonna be so kind of, I mean, they were very COVID safe kind of episodes with a lot of phone calls in small rooms and single locations. I'm not gonna say that they rewrote anything, but maybe they tweaked things here and there. But this one definitely felt like larger crowd scenes and a lot of different locations too. It was it's very fast paced.
They were all over the place this episode. The location that I want to talk about is Kendall's new apartment. It's different from the one we've seen in previously. It has white walls, one painting on the wall, a tiny desk. It is a very sad single dad apartment that reminded me of Bill Hader's Zoom interviews, to be frank.
That is such a deep cut. I love that.
Someone on Reddit actually figured out, based on the view outside the windows of his apartment, that he is in Hudson Yards. That's in Midtown.
Okay,
not
translate that for non-New Yorkers. Okay, Midtown.
Yeah, not particularly close to his children, so he continues to not beat the deadbeat dad allegations.
Oh, no, he doesn't. I also saw, like, somebody put this on Twitter, but Jeremy Strong's, like, Gucci sneakers were visible in one shot.
Oh, they were.
Just, like, on the ground by a desk. Which is really funny. I want Kendall to, like, just have the same wardrobe as Jeremy Strong at this point.
They already have the same wardrobe. It's the same necklace. It's Jeremy's necklace.
It's Jeremy's necklace. It's Kendall's necklace. It's the same necklace, but they're different. So Logan meets with Michelle Ann.
I also was not expecting to actually see her after the first episode, though, like, now I can see how they're definitely setting it up. And I think it's a good way to keep the president kind of present this season without actually showing him in a way that feels very similar to Veep.
I thought their, like, rapport in the scene was good. Like, you could kind of tell how they're, somewhat friendly, with each other. They know each other, but then it begins to, get pretty tense. And Logan keeps insisting that he's not asking for anything. But I thought the way he said it was really interesting. He's like, I want nothing. I don't want anything. I want nothing. And it was like, okay, we can read between the lines. And you want literally nothing. You don't want them to do. Yeah, you don't want them to do anything, right? You don't want an investigation. You don't want anything. So I thought it was just kind of funny the way he kept repeating that.
And Logan's not the most direct person. Like, this is the same way he talks to his kids. He's not going to tell them directly what he wants.
He was so confident that he could pull this off, and he just made it worse for himself. And I love that. So then Kendall goes to Waystar to plant a flag? Question mark? Did he plant a flag? What do you think?
Does he even know what it means to plant a flag?
Does anyone know what that means?
I love that Logan latched onto that. What does he mean by that? He clearly doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
And the way Kendall was talking about that was so bizarre. He was just like, I really just want to, get in there and, like, physically plant a flag. But I just thought, like, this scene and, like, this sequence was so fun, just kind of like the building of the chaos and, cutting between where Kendall is and everyone reacting to it. Also, like, Kendall told Greg he was coming for no reason, and Greg, like, immediately ratted him out, which was so funny.
It's so funny. It's the third episode, and I guess Kendall was right. Greg is already Judasing him.
Totally.
I want to know, we have a few more cut lines in this episode. Though maybe not cut lines, maybe they were already planning on cutting these lines and just threw them into the trailer. But they cut Kendall talking to himself in the mirror, as well as the revolution will be televised.
I think, did they also cut Logan being like, I'm gonna fucking kill him?
Yep.
Yeah, so there were a few lines that clearly were filmed as part of this, sequence. At the time they put out the trailer, they probably didn't have, like, the full edit, so they were probably deciding on which lines to use. And those were great trailer lines. Like, I'm just so glad that we have, you are Kendall Roy, you are fucking Kendall Roy. Like, I will always cherish the way I felt when I first watched that trailer.
It's little bonus content for the people who were there for the trailers. I think it's cool.
I also like how Logan just, like, ignores him. He's not going to give Kendall what he wants, which is attention. But Colin does show up to intimidate him a little bit. And I don't think that Logan, like, sent him to do that. I didn't get that vibe from that impression, but I think it's kind of interesting to think about the way that some of these smaller characters that are in the Roy's orbit and in these roles where they have so much personal contact with the family, to see kind of a glimpse of what they think about it.
I don't think Logan ordered this. I think after all his squabbling, he did take Jerry's advice and decide to ignore Kendall the whole family did except Colin. I think the show does a very good job with its side characters and making them feel like they definitely have their own full lives and kind of reminding you at times in a very uncomfortable way about how much they have seen and how much the Roys have taken advantage of them.
Yes. I mean, I think about Colin, like, at the end of season 1 when he kind of ushered Kendall out of the room as he was still, like, sobbing and got him onto a plane, knowing everything that had happened.
He definitely just sees him as a little bratty kid who cried in his arms one time.
So the town hall scene, talk about another exercise in cringe. Shiv does not get very far into her speech, and I mean, she was doing a pretty good job. It might have been okay even. I mean, she had the prepared questions, so it's not like anything too surprising could have happened. But then, so Nirvana's song Rape Me begins playing and just chaos breaks out. And Sarah Snook's acting in here, like the face journey that she does on stage and just the humiliation and confusion and hurt and rage on her face, I think was just like really incredible stuff from Sarah.
Oh yeah, that was very humiliating. This was the public announcement of her becoming the president. Just went the worst way possible, I think. Lots of fan theories about what exactly happened here, which I don't think was intentionally ambiguous.
Yes, so there were a couple people that, said this, and it did get a little bit of traction on Twitter, that maybe it wasn't Kendall who did the Nirvana bombing of the town hall, for lack of a better term. So some people thought, well, maybe it was, Logan's team and they framed Kendall. But I just very much doubt that because, well, for one thing, previously we saw that Kendall gave like a shopping list to his assistant. So it seems like that was, the setup, and it was pretty clear, the boxes in his office. Obviously, we didn't see who personally did it, but I don't really I don't have any doubt at all that it was Kendall's idea. I mean, what a perfect stunt
style.
too. Like, it's so his style, and it just shows this like meme-ified way that he's like dealing with this, that I think if it wasn't clear already, like he's not taking this as a serious thing, and like he thinks like this is just a funny little stunt.
Oh yeah, Logan would not have thought of this, I think, ever.
Yeah, if Logan had imagine Logan like pitching this, like, all right, so Colin, what I need you to do, Nirvana.
And I think a good comparison would be Sad Sack Wasp Trap, where there was a misdirection where it appeared that they revealed that Shiv had ratted Tom out to Jerry about wanting to come forward about cruises, and then at the end of the episode they revealed that this was actually Greg, which I think is the most we've seen the show do a misdirection. Like, they don't do multi-episode reveals like that. I think
it just feels like revealing it after the episode at this point would be really weird.
Yeah, I don't feel like they do that. I think it's something people have come to expect from TV at this point, but Succession is not that kind of show. And also, it wouldn't really change anything, I feel. Like, Kendall still said all those things to her and has been acting up a lot. To have him say, well, I didn't do that, it's like, well, okay, great, thanks.
Yes, and I think that this episode is stronger if he did a really fucked up thing to Shiv first. Like, right after apologizing and being like, I'm trying to be more thoughtful, I'll stop, throwing ugly rocks. Oh yeah, Kendall, that was a really thoughtful move.
And I think what's so terrifying is that Logan doesn't have to do anything to get them to attack each other.
Yes.
Like, he just sends them some perfectly nice donuts and they start ripping into each other.
Yeah, I do kind of hate the idea that he's like actively, meddling in their affairs. I think this show is way more effective at kind of showing like the legacy of abuse and trauma is that like he doesn't even have to do anything anymore, or he hardly does anything. And I think that's why this show's so effective, is because he's like 80 years old. Like, he isn't that strong. Like, there's no real reason for them to be afraid of him like right now, but it's just all of this, lifetime of conditioning, and that's why they act the way they do. And I think that's why the show is so good. But yeah, anyway, we went on a little tangent there, but
It's a good tangent.
let's do Candy Baby.
Hot. Ugh.
My candy baby for this week is someone who I've been trying to avoid picking to spotlight some other people, but I think the day has come, and my candy baby for the episode is Kendall. He was very sexy in the black suit, also very hot, just hanging around the house in his old Harvard tee. Get you a guy who can do both. Something I've said to Jenny as we've watched various Jeremy Strong movies, and he plays a lot of similar roles. He gets sad a lot, and I think it's very normal to both want to wrap him in a blanket and kiss him in these moments. I think that's a normal reaction to have to Jeremy Strong.
So mine was also Kendall. I have to follow my heart. I was gonna see if I could hold out until he shaves his head, because that is gonna be a look. And he will be getting the honor of Candy Baby at least one more this season. But I just had to this episode. I mean, I will put it this way. It's like that part in the new season of Ted Lasso when Roy says to Keeley, "Is that your kink? Me being pathetic?" And yes, it is our kink, Kendall. And he had some very good outfits too, like Savannah mentioned, the all black, his little casual jackets and baseball hats. He was serving. And yeah, I like it when he's a sad little husk of a man, or like a small little baby bird. That's what I look for in a man. What can I say?
Just broadcasting that to the world.
Just like a broken human.
Come to St. Paul if you're a sad little bird man.
Yeah, hit me up.
I think this means that Kendall has won the episode, as like he's just the ultimate candy baby.
All right, so in sort of a parallel to last week's episode, now Shiv is trying to convince her brothers to join her, and it doesn't go well for her either. This family just can't figure it out. And I like the fact that Roman very strongly refuses to sign, even though he has said like a lot of the same things about Kendall privately, or even to his face has made like lots of jokes about him being a junkie. It's clear that to him, like, saying it publicly is just a huge step that he will not take, and he really understands like the weight of it, and he isn't that angry at Kendall that he would do that to him. But Shiv she really is. She is so mad at him. Yeah,
she is being really selfish here. Roman has been doing things for their dad that he doesn't want to do all season.
Yeah, like the interview. He literally, like, in the same episode, he's like, oh yeah, sometimes we do things we don't want to do. Like, Shiv didn't even do the interview.
Yeah, he knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only reason Shiv is now wanting to do something that her dad asked of her is because she's mad. She wants to stand up in front of the world and say, my brother was mean to me. Isn't that awful? Yes. And she's not being transparent about that.
Yes. Which I love this for her, honestly. Like, I think this is a really, really great character and plot beat. It just makes so much sense that, like, this is what it takes for her to very publicly back Waystar and, like, Logan, is for her brother to have done something, like, worse to her personally that she's, like, pissed about.
Oh, yeah. It totally tracks, and the way she does it is so Shiv. She's like, look, I'm basically just doing my civic duty here by talking shit about Kendall in public. I don't know why you guys won't back me here.
Yeah, and she's like, it's all true and verifiable. And they're like, yeah, it is true, but that doesn't mean we should say it publicly. Like, yeah, that's terrible.
That's not what they're taking issue with here. Also, it's not entirely true, but I understand what she means.
And I also think that, like, it's clear that the brothers kind of realize that Shiv is, like, the one who matters, and that Logan isn't really going to give them a hard time about not signing it, which I think could be part of it, too. I mean, you know, not to say that they would have done it if Logan pressured them, but I think that also probably made it easier for both of them to be like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. And, like, Roman saying that Kendall taught him how to aim his pee-pee in the toilet. Why was that so cute? I'm like, oh.
It was so cute. It was a genuinely good reason. I hate that Shiv, like, shadowed it like that, but that's being a good older brother.
That's his brother. They're literally brothers, you guys.
They're literally brothers. I feel like sometimes it's easy because the brothers are more crass, that, like, it makes it seem like Shiv is more in control or being rational here. Yeah. But they're actually the ones making good points in this scene.
One thing that stood out to me was I thought that Shiv and Kendall already had a pretty big rift just after last week. But like, little did I know, like, I was like, man, this is going to take a while for them to recover from this. And then they met at the gala and it wasn't that bad. And I was like, oh, maybe I was wrong. Like, maybe this is just kind of normal for them to hurl like vicious insults at each other. And it's like, it is, to be fair, like, it is pretty normal and they'll go back to normal. So I do like that they took this huge additional step here. Now it feels very much a rift, and that one scene in the preview of Shiv and Kendall like screaming at each other and up in each other's faces, woo, I'm so excited for that scene. Like, that is gonna go off.
I'm so excited too for her that it's just Shiv he's really gone off this hard on, and that it's not actually that broken for him between Roman and Connor at this point.
Yes, that's true. It'll be interesting to kind of see how those other dynamics play out. So Kendall has his late night comedy moment. First, he invites himself into the writer's room and asks them to hurt him, which, you know, he explicitly, referenced BoJack 2 episodes ago. So I'll just say this is very BoJack of him. Like, I could definitely see like this exact thing actually being an arc in BoJack where he's like, hurt me. And then like somebody writes a letter about him and he's like, no, that hurts. Never mind.
Kendall said hooking Greg up with the watch guy, something Greg clearly doesn't care about at all, feels like something BoJack would do to Todd.
BoJack would do that to Todd because Todd is the Greg to BoJack's Kendall. I'm confused about what I just said, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, we've discussed this.
The momentum of this episode that kind of carried through with everything kind of leading into the next, and this letter that Shiv wrote being released, and then he reads it, and I feel like the reaction does kind of go slowly, which I thought was really good. He begins to react to it, and then he hasn't totally crashed yet, but then when he talks to the, producer or whatever, he's like starting to try to back out of it, and then it's when he's alone and he's walking down the hallway in, Jeremy's 2-minute like Emmy reel, that's when it all really begins to hit him.
I want to mention, last week we talked about the donut pounding that got cut from the episode.
Yes.
And I will say, after having seen this episode, I feel like it had a bit more impact that this is the first time all season that we really got him alone. We saw a bit of him being insane in his apartment earlier, and here we really got a classic Kendall walking sadly and slowly away from someone and just curling up scene.
Yes, I agree. I think that now, having seen this episode, I don't mourn the loss of the donut tantrum as much. I think this was really the scene that I felt like I needed, and it came at the perfect point. He is still a good ways from his rock bottom, and I'm sure he will bounce back and be crazy and manic soon again and have more ups and downs, but I just think having this moment of humanity from him was really good. And I like how they kind of made us wait for the letter a little bit. We didn't really get what did she actually say until we saw Sophie, reading it on TV.
It was really well staged, I think. He is just in this room alone with the TV. He has no one to laugh with him this time.
Yeah.
We see him kind of like, he curls in on himself a little more when the show starts, as if people could see him, which just absolutely broke my heart.
Oh, little baby bird.
And I wish we could have seen the full letter, because what we got was just so much. She accuses Kendall of showing signs of grandiose and disordered thinking, which I thought was a bold claim from someone who was definitely buying what Kendall was selling last episode.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. Like, she was very close to, joining his team. And as she said to him in this episode, like, they're sort of on the same side in that they want the same thing, or at least she thought that Kendall did. But I think at this point, she really thinks that he doesn't actually want any of the change, that this is just some kind of lashing out, ego thing, which from her perspective, very fair assumption to make. And, it is partially that, so.
Yeah, and she's still not very privy to his, internal thoughts or why he really had this huge shift. I did think it was very interesting we got that the public perception is that Shiv is the nice one.
Yes.
Which I think is just because Shiv is not the person who's going to be flashing gang signs outside of John George or saying a slur in public. I think that is the only reason that she's gotten this reputation.
And yeah, just the way that the letter was written, I thought the reason why it was so hurtful, because it felt really similar to that speech that Logan gave to Kendall at the end of season 1, where he said, "You're not made for this world. You're a hothouse flower. You're nothing." The way that she said, like, we've tried to help him and our hopes for his recovery were misplaced, and just this kind of pity of, please, give Kendall his privacy in this difficult time, I thought was like so cutting and brutal, because all Kendall really wants is to be taken seriously and to be a real threat. So for this to be just so like dismissive and be like, he's just doing this because he's an addict and he has mental health issues, and please just stop making a big fuss about it because it's not helping and he needs to recover. Like, that is the thing that Kendall does not want to hear, because is it true? Yeah, it's pretty true. And I think that's why it hurts him so much.
Yeah, that's the number one thing that Logan has always taught them. You have to be a killer. You can't show any weakness whatsoever. So when someone is yelling at Kendall or making fun of him, I think that energizes him. It's like, okay, I'm being taken seriously, I'm doing the right thing here, and this just completely crushes him. I know Jeremy Strong mentioned in an interview that he was initially reluctant about this scene and whether it would really crush Kendall, though he did come around in the end. And I think it's very clear why. Like, it's the difference between someone just giving Kendall shit about his addiction versus the pity is what he can't take.
Let's do best line.
Words are just, nothing. Complicated airflow.
My favorite line of the episode was when Tom was giving his, was at dinner with the ATN people, and Hugo informed him that the FBI was raiding the building, and he said, "Guys, a little heads up, and this is not something I want us to get out of proportion nor spoil the evening, but it would seem that some agents of federal law enforcement are raiding the premises right now, so if you see them, that's what that is."
I love this choice.
To me, it was just like the most like Succession-y line that has ever successioned. It's so funny, just like the casualness of being like, oh, it seems that the FBI is, and also the way he said like agents of federal law enforcement. So if you see them, that's what that is like it's a very Midwest, non-confrontational thing to say.
So my favorite line of the episode was, "I'm embarrassed to say to my mother I work at Waystar. Any advice?"
Yeah, those little glimpses into what, like, the normal people think.
Yeah, like, we got a lot of glimpses this episode at, like, the public perception of Waystar and the Roys. But I found it even more interesting getting a taste of what the employees, particularly ones who maybe don't work as close with the Roys, what they think of the whole situation. And I think between those questions, the slogan, and the town hall designed to boost morale, the show just really gets corporate culture.
So Roman ends up doing the interview to talk about how much he loves his daddy, because they wanted Shiv or someone like Shiv, which must just be so insulting.
That's the whole theme of the season so far. So they're like, it could be someone of the kids, Shiv, or like Shiv.
And I love at the end when he reveals that it was actually Connor who took him on the fishing trip when he was a kid. That is such a sweet little detail.
Immediately when Roman mentioned a fishing trip, I was like, okay, that wasn't with Logan. Like, maybe Frank or some other person close to the family. But the fact that it was Connor, we're really going to see a different side of him this season. And his dad just gives him a very hard time about this thing that he asked Roman to do.
He calls him a slur.
He calls him a slur, which I found particularly funny.
Honestly, that was my biggest laugh of this episode. I'll admit that. That was like just like a shocked laugh. It was so funny.
It was so funny, particularly because Logan has definitely called him slurs before. He has totally figured him in this way.
He only wanted Shiv to do it. If it was going to be anybody else, he's like, I don't really care. I don't need you to do this for me. In fact, it makes you look weak, Roman, to love your dad. Like, what an asshole, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah, the kids really cannot win with Logan, and I think it's also interesting how Roman and Shiv have both been very much used by their dad so far this season, but I think Roman is kind of resigned to it. He knows he's just being used for PR. Whereas Shiv is like, I'm actually making some change here.
Shiv always thinks that she can be the real winner. She's like, but I'll play him right back. And she never actually succeeds in doing that, except in Dundee. I'll give her that one, but she very rarely has gotten a win over on her dad. But she always thinks that, like, this will be good for me if I do this, where I think, like, Roman knows exactly why he's doing it. It's just because he's been asked to, and he can't really say no. Then it's FBI time. This was such a great end of this episode, and I thought that Jerry's reaction was great. Like, you could tell she was, like, pretty pissed at Logan for pretty much, like, bringing this on himself, more or less, and kind of, you know, like, yelled at him a little bit. And so, like, the government isn't a Pez dispenser. You can't just push a button and get what you want, which, you know, reminded me of like what Kendall said earlier in the episode when he was talking to Lisa and said, like, yeah, we can't get a raid, but, you know, you can kind of push the right buttons. So that is interesting, like, the things he's kind of learned from his dad about, like, oh, you can get that if you know how to play the people and the politics.
And I really loved Jerry here yelling at Logan. Like, there are very few characters, I think, who would be comfortable doing this, and also who would maintain their own, like, composure and not get too, like, emotional about it, I think.
Yeah, this was a great scene for her, and obviously, you know, she's so, like, stressed out that she's kind of lost that, you know, filter, but I enjoyed watching her kind of tear into Logan a little bit. That was fun.
Yeah.
Because he is just backed into a corner and he has to cooperate, which is just, you know, crushing. And the way he's kind of, like, leaning dramatically against his window while the FBI agents, and he's like, just leave it.
Just leave it.
It was so funny.
Can't
It's
even
like,
look at it.
it's like he's like a teenager when his, like, mom comes into his room. He's like, just leave me alone. Logan in his flop era. Yeah, this, like, closing montage, just amazing. The score was so good. It was just really fun.
Yeah, they do a lot of montages, and I think they work well. It's okay to be a little earnest sometimes, Kendall.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, it was great. And Kendall's smile, or slight smile at the end, was such a great closing image of, after he's been, you know, beaten down so much, to have this small, you know, victory. At least right now it might not go very well for what he actually wants to achieve, but yeah, it just made me think of, like, the Kendall wins but loses thing that was apparently on a note card that the writers had up in the writer's room at some point earlier in the show, as just being sort of a summary of his arc. And that was very much what I took away from this, is, like, tiny victory, but he can't feel that triumphant about it because of everything that's happened for him to get there.
Kendall wins but loses is something that's been mentioned in a few interviews at this point. The earliest I found was a Vox interview in 2018 to cite our sources. So this definitely seems like something that was probably up during season 1. Obviously he doesn't win there, so it must be more of an arc thing for him, which I really love. I think it's very fitting, and like Kendall, I love pain, so.
It's like such a great, just tragic arc
Yeah.
for any character. Let's close this out with buy or sell.
Sell seems cool.
So this week I am buying Jerry. So I've been very nervous about Jerry's role this season, but I thought she did a very good job of holding her own this episode. And Logan did actually do, like, everything she was telling him to do. Not immediately, but he did come around. And she, you know, no one in these rooms wants to listen to her, but she still got what she needed as acting CEO. And it is a very difficult episode for buy and sell, I feel. There are not a lot of options to buy, so I will say that I'm not buying a lot of Jerry stock. I'm just buying a little Jerry stock. Yeah, but I feel hopeful, tentatively hopeful about her role after this episode.
Nice.
And I am selling Greg. I was feeling a bit better about his arc after the previous episode, but at this point he's lost me. Like, he's just not taking the situation seriously, I feel. No one on Team Kendall is, but I'm highlighting Greg. and he's making bad investments. He caved after very little peer pressure about the watch. It's just not a good look.
You buy a $40,000 watch to impress a girl, like, weak.
He's like, she shrugged a little, so this will impress her. I think he does still have some conniving moves up his sleeve. I'm definitely selling before his peak, but I just feel better not being financially dependent on him right now because I just think he's floundering a bit.
Yeah, wise move. So I am selling Logan. He fucked around and found out in this episode. He couldn't help but try and meddle and pull his little strings, and now Waystar has been raided by the FBI. So what a great victory for all fans of Logan in his flop era, which is me. So I love when he, like, very squarely fucks up. I think it's fun. Which, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what they actually find, for sure. I mean, they did some cleanup, but still, it's not good. I mean, there's a shareholder vote in, like, a week. So, good luck. And they're all over the news for getting raided. So, bad news. For Bai, as you said, this was a tough one because it just felt like everyone lost. Everyone's flopping all over the place. So, I feel like I have to gamble on someone who I think is going to rise up from this point. So I'm going to buy Tom back. I sold him in episode 1, and now, you know what? I'm going to buy him back. He's my St. Paul boy. I have my loyalties. So I'm interested in the moves he's making here, and I am really hopeful that he's going to jump ship from Waystar, that he is going to maneuver a little bit and not just take the fall for it. So I want him to make his wife mad and go work for Kendall. I think that would be funny. So I'm hoping for a good return on this investment.
I love that. He was also on my buy list.
Yeah.
I think it's a good investment.
Something's happening there with good old Tommy.
Something's happening. It's very exciting.
Thank you for listening. We will be back next week for episode 4.
Thank you for listening.
Does Roman have, like, any friends?
He had the one friend, Edward.
Oh, we're counting Edward? I don't even know if I would count Edward as being his friend.
I guess I'm kind of counting him as a friend because he's like Stewie light, and Stewie is Kendall's friend, but it is a stretch.